안녕하십니까? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to extend my appreciation for the organizers, Korean Intellectual Property Office, 파이낸셜뉴스, Korean Intellectual Property Society for inviting me to this great event. Today, we don't have Japanese Korean interpreter, so I have to speak in English, which is not my native language, but I should try my best. So, as introduced, I started my career as an IP litigator, and then I joined the Japanese Fair Trade Commission, the Antitrust Authority in Japan. Since then, the cross-border area between IP and antitrust is the biggest my focus. So I would like to share the views from Japan today. Let me begin with the background facts. I want to introduce the current situation in Japanese economy. So as described in my second page of my slide, Japan is home to many tech companies, as you see. If you hear you may respond that we have Samsung, we have Hyundai. Chinese people say we have the Huawei. Yeah, that's right. My point is not Japanese companies are better. Rather, I just want to say that in Japan, we have many companies in the same industry. Some companies want to have more strong IP protection. Others may want to have more free use of technology. Even in the same company, some division wants to more strong the IP protection, and other division prefer the free use technology. So always the Japanese government and the court have to pay attention to the reconciliation of protection of IP and the facilitation of use of IP. Then I move on to the antitrust enforcement in Japan. In Japan, the Japan Fair Trade Commission, JFTC, is an authority. And recently, Japan is a home to many cartel violators in the sectors like auto parts and electric components. So we have series of auto parts cartel and the LCD, CRT price fixing cartels. But since the current chairman, Sugimoto, took his place, he always emphasizes on the importance of application of our antitrust law to the cutting-edge technology sectors. So the GAFA, the abbreviation of Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, is a very common word for Japanese antitrust practitioners. And until recently, we haven't seen many cases in this sector, but last year, the JFTC down-rated the Amazon for the accused use of MFN, the most favorite nation clause, for their sales in the e-books. And also, the JFTC opened the investigation against 3 major mobile phone carriers, namely NTT Docomo, au, and SoftBank, for alleged prohibition of the marketing of the application software or apps for the smartphones, other than the apps provided by these mobile carriers. So they are not technically IP issue, but as JFTC is focusing on tech area, we may see the more cases in the near future. So before discussing the actual cases, let me briefly introduce how Japanese antitrust law works. So this slide shows the competition law framework, comparing our antitrust law in Japan with the US and the EU. So like the competition law in many other countries, the Japanese antitrust law regulates the 4 aspects, namely cartels, unilateral conduct, vertical restraints, mergers. Unilateral conduct means the abuse of dominance position or monopolization. So this relates to the abuse of IP rights. And the vertical restraint means the antitrust issue arising out of the transactional relationships, including the licensing agreement. So again, the vertical restraints relates to the IP issues. And compared with the American and European law, the Japanese antitrust law has special provision called unfair trade practice, as you see on my slide. So unfair trade practice is the broader regulation against unilateral conduct and vertical restraint, which means that the Japanese antitrust law has more flexibility in enforcing competition law on IP-related issue than the major jurisdictions like US and EU. In Japanese antitrust law, we have a provision relating to the IP issue, the Article 21 of AMA, Anti-Monopoly Act in Japan. Article 21 says the provisions of this act, the Anti-Monopoly Act, do not apply to acts found to constitute an exercise of rights under the Copyright Act, Patent Act, Utility Model Act, Design Act, or Trademark Act. It seems that this provision exempts the use of IP completely, but it is not the case. The prevailing interpretation of this the provision is that the antitrust law doesn't give any special protection on IP. Article 21 confirms the obvious fact that the proper use of IP does not violate antitrust law. And even the apparent proper use of IP may violate antitrust law if it contradicts the spirit of IP laws. So although we have the provision, special provision for IP, it does not exempt the use of IP completely. And in response to this, the Article 21, the JFTC has issued more detailed guidelines in relation to IP. On this slide, page 6, I described the 2 major guidelines, IP guidelines and patent pool guidelines. Actually, we have more, including guidelines on the joint research and development or something, but today I will focus on these 2. So IP guidelines discuss the many issues, including the geographical or customer restriction on sales of licensed products, the exclusive supply of raw materials from licensor, or non-contrast obligation on novelty and non-obviousness, and the grant back and the assign backs. These are the issues often coming up to my practice, but in these guidelines, actually there are many more conducts explained. In patent pool guidelines, the guidelines explain the issues like inclusion of non-essential patents in a patent pool, restriction on participation in standard setting process or in the patent pool, or different license royalties from different licensees. So again, these are the only the major examples from the guidelines, and other issues are also discussed in the guidelines. And these guidelines are available in English on the JFTC's website. So if you are interested in, please take a look. And also, I have to mention that these guidelines have a so-called safe harbor, where the player with 20% or less market share are exempted from the application of antitrust law. And this safe harbor also applies to the situation where there are 5 competing alternative technologies. So this is very important, especially for the startups, startup ventures. So now we are completing the boring parts of my presentation. So let's move on to more exciting part, the case study. So let me start with the Microsoft case. This case is a little outdated, but I want to discuss this case because it's very fascinating. So in Japan, the cease and desist recommendation was made in 2004, and the decision after the JFTC hearing procedure was issued in 2008. And of course, as you know, there are many antitrust cases against Microsoft all over the world. And from my viewpoint, there are several types of cases against Microsoft, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So for example, in Korea and in EU, the authorities focused on the bundling of application of software. So please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that these authorities are concerned about the bundling of the Windows Media Player with the Microsoft Windows OS. And similarly, but slightly differently, the US authority focused on the bundling of Internet Explorer, i.e. with the Windows OS. And a little strangely, Japan focused on the completely different aspects of Microsoft's conduct, which is the non-assertion of patent clause in Microsoft's license agreement of the Windows OS with PC manufacturers. So let me briefly see the Microsoft cases outside Japan. So again, the Korea and the EU cases are focusing on the bundle of application software. And this is exclusion of competitors in a tied product. So when it comes to the bundling, we say we refer to the tying product and the tied product. Tying product means the product which the violator has a monopoly market power, and the tied product is a product in the market where that violator tries to expand its business. So in the Korean and the European case, the Microsoft tried to take advantage of its monopoly power in the tying product market, the OS market, to expand its business into the tied market, namely the application market. On the other hand, in the US, again, they focused on the bundling of the IE, Internet Explorer, with the Microsoft OS. But it's not just about the exclusion of the competitors in the tied product market. Because as you see on this slide, Internet Explorer is called middleware, where the other application software are working on its platform. So now, as you use the browsers like Internet Explorer or Google Chrome or whatever, you can use, let's say, the Google Spreadsheet, Google Word processing software, many functions on the browser. And actually, in the first place, what is the function of Windows OS? Windows OS main function is to run the applications on its platform. So actually, as internet browser developed, the middlewares like IE and its competitors have the same function as the Windows OS. And what the US authorities said was the Microsoft tried to bundle Internet Explorer to exclude the competitors of IE to protect their market position in the Windows operating system, in addition to the middleware market. So it's slightly different from the European and Korean case in that the American authority focused more on the protection of tying market. So that's the difference between these two. And so let's move on to the completely different case in Japan. So again, the Japan focused on the non-assertion of patent clause, the so-called NAP clause. What the NAP clause is? So NAP clause is the provision in the license agreement where the licensee is prohibited to use or exercise its patent right against the licensor and others. And the scope of the whom you cannot assert the patent is depending on how the language is described in the license agreement. But typically, under the NAP, the licensee here, licensee A, cannot assert its patent against licensor and other licensees of this licensor. And this kind of clause restricts the ability of licensees to exercise its patents, and eventually it loses an incentive of licensees for research and development for future technologies. So it sounds bad. But you may have a question. So is there any difference between this NAP clause and the common grantbacks? So grantbacks itself are permitted in many jurisdictions, including Japan. So the grantbacks somehow work like this. So what's the difference and how it makes worse for this NAP? So the answer is it's case by case. So depending on the fact, NAP is worse than the other grantbacks, and in other cases, NAP is permitted like the grantbacks.